The first one went through the U.S. Congress in an appropriate, if unwise, fashion. It was a $700 billion TARP bailout. $700 billion. And then the crumbling edifice of this citadel of greed and self-dealing and executive compensation, roguishness, that even tanked their own companies. And these bosses jumped ship with a golden parachute. Became so great that more bailouts were deemed necessary by corporate-occupied territory known as Washington, D.C. And so the Wall Street boys sent more of their people down to take high positions in the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and advising members of Congress. In late 2008, there was a page-one story in the Washington Post, a long profile of Henry Paulson, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, left with a $600 million fortune, and became Secretary of the Treasury. The usual New York, Washington shuttle. Of course, a main competitor of Goldman Sachs was Lehman Brothers. It's rather strange that he presided over the demise of Lehman Brothers, which went bankrupt, and they're still trying to clean up the debris on that one. At any rate, right on page one of the Washington Post, he says the following: "I never had the authorities to do what I did, but I did it anyway, because someone had to do it." I just think of that. Here's what he meant. Late last year, Citigroup was on the cliff. We're talking about a big bank here, obviously. Maybe $1 trillion in assets. More assets than all the 8,000 credit unions put together in the United States. It's on the brink. Robert Rubin, another genius, smart guy, was one of the architects of excessive risk-taking, otherwise known as casino capitalism, by Citigroup. And he saw on a Friday that Monday Citigroup may be over the cliff. He flies down to Washington, he meets in secret with Bernanke and with Paulson, Chairman of the Reserve, Federal Reserve, and Secretary of Treasury. Monday morning press conference that the Treasury and the Federal Reserve decided $45 billion purchase in preferred stock, $370 billion of guarantees of bad notes of Citigroup. Where's the authority? Where's the Congress? Where's the appropriations authority that the Constitution puts in the House of Representatives first? Oh, he just didn't have the authorities. But it had to be done, so he did it anyway. And he did it again and again and again. AIG, et cetera, et cetera. Enough guarantees, enough subsidies, enough disbursements that they could repair this whole country. Its schools, its bridges, its clinics, its public buildings, its prisons, its criminal courts, and have money left over. What's your indignation level? Is it rising? You don't have any indignation level? Just saying how amusing all this is? Or you don't believe it? What's your indignation level? I'll hear about it after I finish. We're not dealing with trivia here. We're dealing with our country, with our future, with the professional standards of our profession. We're not a trade, you know. We're a profession. The difference between a trade and a profession is that a profession is dedicated to preventing the very activities that its skills are supposed to treat if they occur. We should be preventing conflict. We should be preventing hazards. We should be preventing reckless investment with other people's money, trillions of dollars of pension money, mutual fund money, and other money entrusted to these Wall Street moguls. I shared a seat with Larry Summers on US Air about 1999 from Washington to Boston. And this was right after the financial modernization bill was passed. The euphemisms I'm using. That was the deregulation bill. And I said, Mr. Summers, do you think banks have too much power? It was an unconventional pause. And then he said, "Not yet." Well, there are several ways to take that. I thought there was too much power. But maybe what he really meant was, you haven't seen anything yet after the deregulation. Oh, how smart these people are. My sister and a professor of law from Italy had written a book called Plunder, When a Rule of Law is Illegal. You might want to look at it. Plunder, before the Harvard Law School Library restricts its acquisition by there's a lot more to say about it, but let's move on to the Bush-Cheney criminal behavior. Okay? This is quite interesting. We have several categories of unconstitutional, illegal, under federal statutes in violation of international treaties, many of which are Geneva Conventions that we fostered more than anyone else in the world after World War II. So we have thousands of people thrown into jail in this country without charges, left without attorneys after 9/11, dragnet enforcement, a lot of ethnic profiling there. They were released, 99% innocent from the get-go. We have snooping on U.S. Snooping, thank you. Snooping, warrantless surveillance. We're talking here not one episode like poor little Nixon, We're talking about a recurrent pattern, day after day after day, of using the NSA, the CIA, others. Warrantless spying, snooping happens to be a felony under federal law. There's a 5-year maximum jail sentence. And it doesn't matter who does it. The president is not above the law. Category 3, torture. Ah, yes. The two draft dodgers, Bush and Cheney, who were for the Vietnam War but wanted other American youth to go and fight for them and die in those jungles and kill the Vietnamese, they decreed a policy of torture. The usual euphemism is called enhanced interrogation. And to this day, Cheney believes that waterboarding is not torture. Well, the FBI thinks it's torture. The military thinks it's torture in the past. International treaties think it's torture. Doctors think it's torture. And about everybody thinks it's torture if it's applied to their relatives. And the fifth is the criminal war of aggression against Iraq. That is probably the #1 international crime. It was a war that was premised on false pretenses. We know that is not even debatable anymore. Weapons of mass destruction. He was a threat to the United States. He would send drones over here with weapons. Here was a frightened dictator who didn't know where he was going to sleep any night. Had an army that was so dilapidated, didn't have anyone who was willing to fight for him, surrounded by much more powerful nations that would blow him out of the water if he made a false move, Turkey, Israel, and Iran. And we think this guy's a threat to us. And so it's full of lies, right from the beginning. Now we have Bush associates who come out and written books, his own Richard Clark, his terror advisor in the White House, and so forth. In fact, he said, this guy Clark is something, you got to read his first book. I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close. He said, somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden is beseeching George W. Bush, saying, invade Iraq, oh please, invade Iraq. I'll leave you to those conclusions. So you have at least 4 categories of unconstitutional, illegal, treaty-violating policies or crimes. And where are the law schools?